Welcome to our countdown of the top 5 greatest battles of all time. Throughout human history, conflict has been a constant companion, shaping civilizations and leaving scars on the very soul of humanity. In this video, we'll explore some of the most significant and impactful battles in history. From ancient clashes of empires to modern conflicts that have reshaped the geopolitical landscape, we'll delve into the events that have defined warfare and left an indelible mark on our world. Please note, this video will not include any music to maintain the gravity of the subject matter. The stories of these battles, the sacrifices made, and the consequences they wrought deserve our solemn reflection. Join us now as we journey through time to revisit these pivotal moments in human history. The Vietnam War, a brutal conflict in Southeast Asia, stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of ideological struggle. From the jungles to the rice paddies, this war etched itself into the global consciousness. It was a complex web of political intrigue and Cold War tensions. The images from this conflict are seared into our memory helicopters against a fiery sky, villages in flames, and the faces of young soldiers marked by the horrors they witnessed. The Vietnam War left an unforgettable legacy on those who fought and those who still bear the scars. The Vietnam War's human cost was staggering. Millions of lives were lost or irrevocably altered by the relentless fighting. Soldiers and civilians alike became entangled in a conflict that seemed to have no end in sight. Estimates suggest that over 2 million Vietnamese civilians lost their lives during the war, victims of bombing campaigns, crossfire, and massacres. The war also left a generation of Vietnamese with physical and psychological wounds that would take decades to heal. The United States, deeply involved in the conflict, also suffered heavy losses. Over 58,000 American service members made the ultimate sacrifice in the jungles and rice paddies of Vietnam. The Vietnam War serves as a stark reminder of the immense human cost of war. The numbers, however staggering, can never fully encompass the individual stories of loss, grief, and resilience that define this chapter in human history. The Vietnam War's legacy extends far beyond the battlefields of Southeast Asia. It left an indelible mark on American society, shaping foreign policy, sparking social movements, and igniting debates about the nature of war and its impact on those who fight. The war led to a profound shift in American public opinion, fueling anti-war sentiment and challenging traditional notions of patriotism and national identity. It also highlighted the devastating consequences of Cold War tensions and the dangers of proxy wars. The Vietnam War also had a lasting impact on Vietnam itself. The country was left deeply divided, its economy in shambles, and its people grappling with the trauma of war. Despite the passage of time, the Vietnam War continues to resonate with profound implications for how we understand conflict, its causes, and its enduring consequences. The Soviet-Afghan War, a 9-year conflict, serves as a chilling reminder of the human cost of Cold War proxy battles. Fueled by superpower rivalry and ideological clashes, it was a nation yearning for self-determination. In 1979, the Soviet Union sent its forces into Afghanistan, a conflict that would become their Vietnam. They encountered fierce resistance from Afghan Mujahideen fighters. The war became a breeding ground for guerrilla tactics and a relentless cycle of violence. The Soviet-Afghan War inflicted immense suffering on the Afghan people. Caught in the crossfire of a brutal conflict, Afghan civilians endured displacement, famine, and the constant threat of violence. Millions of Afghans were forced to flee their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring countries like Pakistan and Iran. The war created a massive refugee crisis, straining resources and highlighting the human toll of the conflict. The war's impact on Afghan infrastructure was devastating. Schools, hospitals, and homes were reduced to rubble, leaving the country in ruins and its people struggling to rebuild their lives. The Soviet-Afghan War left an enduring legacy of trauma, displacement, and destruction on the Afghan people, the scars of which are still visible today. The Soviet-Afghan War, a 9-year conflict, serves as a chilling reminder of the human cost of Cold War proxy battles. Fueled by superpower rivalry and ideological clashes, it was a nation yearning for self-determination. The Vietnam War also had a lasting impact on American society, shaping foreign policy, sparking social movements, and igniting debates about the nature of war and its impact on those who fight. The Soviet-Afghan War left an indelible mark on American society, the scars of which are still visible today. The Soviet-Afghan War, often referred to as the Soviet Union's Vietnam, had profound consequences for all involved. It exposed the limits of Soviet military might and contributed to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Empire. The war also had lasting implications for Afghanistan, leaving the country deeply unstable and vulnerable to the rise of extremist groups like the Taliban. The conflict created a power vacuum that continues to fuel instability in the region. The war also had a global impact, fueling the rise of Islamic extremism and highlighting the dangers of Cold War proxy conflicts. The Soviet-Afghan War serves as a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of foreign intervention and the enduring human cost of conflict. The echoes of this forgotten war continue to reverberate today, reminding us of the complex interplay of geopolitics, ideology, and the human desire for freedom. The year is 1990. The Cold War is over, and the world breathes a sigh of relief. But peace, as we know, is a fleeting thing. In the Middle East, a new conflict is brewing. On August 2nd, Iraqi forces, under the command of Saddam Hussein, storm across the border into Kuwait. A small, oil-rich nation, Kuwait becomes a pawn in a much larger game. Hussein claims historical ties, but the world sees a dictator thirsty for power and oil. The United States, under President George H.W. Bush, responds with a force the world hasn't seen since World War II. Over 35 countries join the coalition, united against this act of aggression. Operation Desert Shield, the largest military deployment since Vietnam, begins. The world watches and waits, hoping for a peaceful resolution. But the desert sands, it seems, are already stained with the promise of blood. January 17, 1991. The air war begins. Operation Desert Storm, a relentless aerial bombardment, unleashes its fury upon Iraqi targets. For 42 days and nights, the skies over Iraq light up with the fiery dance of missiles and anti-aircraft fire. Precision bombing, a tactic honed over years of technological advancement, targets Iraqi military installations, communication centers, and supply lines. The world watches, captivated by the nightly news broadcasts, a surreal spectacle of tracers and explosions. On the ground, Iraqi soldiers, many of them young and ill-equipped, face the relentless onslaught of the coalition forces. Fear and uncertainty gnaw at their morale as the desert sands tremble under the weight of approaching tanks. The Gulf War becomes a showcase for technological warfare. Smart bombs, guided by lasers and satellites, strike with pinpoint accuracy. The world marvels at the precision, but behind each explosion lies the grim reality of war. After 42 days of relentless bombardment, the ground invasion begins. Coalition forces surge into Kuwait and Iraq. The Iraqi defenses crumble under the assault. In just 100 hours, Kuwait is liberated. The Iraqi army retreats back across the border. On February 28th, a ceasefire is declared. But victory comes at a cost. Thousands of lives are lost on both sides. The true extent of civilian casualties remains debated. The environment bears the scars of war. Even in victory, the true cost of war is immeasurable. The year is 2003. The world watches as the United States, along with coalition forces, launches an invasion of Iraq. This preemptive strike, based on the belief that Saddam Hussein's regime possessed weapons of mass destruction, would become a defining conflict of the 21st century. The initial invasion was swift, with Baghdad falling within weeks, but the true cost of this war would be measured in a protracted and bloody conflict that lasted for years. The Iraqi people, caught in the crossfire of this global conflict, endured unimaginable suffering. Their nation, once a cradle of civilization, became a battleground marked by violence and instability. As the war dragged on, the human cost continued to rise. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians lost their lives, while millions more were displaced from their homes. The Iraq War was a conflict marked by complexity and controversy. From the initial justification for invasion to the challenges of occupation and rebuilding, the war presented a tangled web of political, military, and humanitarian dilemmas. The search for weapons of mass destruction, which had been a central argument for the war, proved fruitless. This fueled anti-war sentiment and raised questions about the decision-making process that led to the invasion. The conflict also exacerbated sectarian tensions within Iraq, leading to a surge in violence between Sunni and Shia Muslims. This further destabilized the region and created a breeding ground for extremism. The Iraq War serves as a stark reminder of the devastating cost of conflict. It underscores the importance of diplomacy, the need for international cooperation, and the profound impact war has on innocent lives. The legacy of the Iraq War continues to shape the Middle East today. The conflict left behind a trail of destruction, instability, and deep-seated resentment. The scars of war are etched on the landscape and in the hearts of the Iraqi people. The war also had a profound impact on the United States. The human and financial costs were immense, and the war sparked a national conversation about the use of military force in the 21st century. As we reflect on the Iraq War, we must learn from its lessons. We must strive for peaceful resolutions to conflict, prioritize diplomacy over military intervention, and work tirelessly to rebuild shattered nations and communities. The Iraq War serves as a solemn reminder that the pursuit of peace is a continuous journey, a journey that demands our unwavering commitment and compassion. The year is 2011. The Arab Spring, a wave of pro-democracy uprisings, sweeps across the Middle East and North Africa. In Syria, what began as peaceful protests against the authoritarian rule of Bashar al-Assad quickly escalated into a brutal civil war. A complex web of internal divisions and external interventions transformed Syria into a battleground for regional and global powers. The conflict drew in various factions, each with their own agendas, further fueling the violence and chaos. The Syrian people, caught in the crossfire of this multi-sided conflict, faced unimaginable brutality. Their nation, once a vibrant tapestry of cultures and religions, was torn apart by violence and destruction. As the conflict spiraled, millions of Syrians were forced to flee their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring countries and beyond. The Syrian refugee crisis became a defining humanitarian tragedy of our time. The Syrian Civil War became a global crisis with far-reaching consequences. The conflict fueled the rise of extremist groups, such as ISIS, which exploited the chaos to seize territory and spread terror. The war also triggered a massive humanitarian crisis, with millions of Syrians displaced from their homes and in desperate need of aid. The international community struggled to respond to the sheer scale of the suffering. The Syrian Civil War also highlighted the complexities of modern warfare, where conventional armies clash with rebel groups, terrorist organizations, and foreign powers, all vying for control. The conflict exposed the limitations of international institutions, such as the United Nations, in effectively addressing and resolving such complex and intractable conflicts. As the Syrian Civil War enters its second decade, the situation remains dire. While the intensity of the fighting has decreased in recent years, the country is still a long way from achieving peace and stability. Millions of Syrians remain displaced, both within the country and abroad. The task of rebuilding Syria and healing the wounds of war will be a monumental challenge. Despite the devastation, there are glimmers of hope. Local ceasefires and peace initiatives offer a faint glimmer of optimism. The international community continues to provide humanitarian aid, albeit insufficient, to meet the overwhelming needs. The Syrian Civil War serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the urgent need for peaceful solutions. It is a call for global solidarity and a commitment to building a more just and peaceful world. Thank you for watching our countdown of the top 5 greatest battles of all time. From the ancient battlefields to the modern conflicts that continue to shape our world, war leaves an indelible mark on human history. We hope this video has provided you with a deeper understanding of these significant historical events. These battles are not just stories in history books. They represent the struggles, sacrifices, and triumphs of countless individuals. Let us remember the lessons learned from these conflicts and work towards a future where dialogue, diplomacy, and understanding prevail over violence and destruction. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more informative content.